Okay, happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time today to dig into some career growth. So this is our last July session. We are so excited to be teaming with the Disability and Neurodivergence TMRG. Huge shout out to them. For those of you that haven't joined any of our previous sessions, this is part of an overall TMRG's support career growth calendar. And you can find the link in our agenda 1A. Our intention here is to be double clicking on some of these topics, right? We're a huge company. We have a ton of resources. It can be really daunting to figure out where to start, where you're going with your career. And there's so much opportunity at GitLab. So we want to make sure everyone has a place where they can feel like they have some easy access, because the handbook is enormous and very overwhelming. And that's not always a great fit for all our different learning styles. So to that end, we were so excited to team with the Disability and Neurodivergence TMRG, because our topic today is feedback, which is a topic that can be so challenging, right? It's communication, and it's critical to us getting somewhere in our career and in life in general. So I'm really excited about this topic. A quick shout out to the resources that have been provided so far in Slack. You can find those in 1B in regards to July being Disability Pride Month. So you see the background. We've got that linked as well with 1 day to go. Thank you all again for joining. I forgot to say, my name is Pilar Mejia. I lead the Gente TMRG, and I'm so thrilled to be here with a great panel and with my wonderful co-host, Dami. Hello, Dami. How are you?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's been I've been very much looking forward to this session, and yeah, I very much echo the same energy that Pilar is giving us this morning or this afternoon. But yeah, I'm happy to be co-host today for today's session. I am one of the co-leads for the Disability and Neurodivergence TMRG. And yeah, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you all. I did add some bits into the chat, so if you will have your questions, if you have any particular questions, you can add them to the document. If you want to ask them anonymously, because we appreciate that that might be a more comfortable way of asking questions, especially if your manager's on the call. You can do that via Slido. So the link will be in the chat as well. I've got it open over here, so if you wanted to ask something anonymously, you can do that too, or you can DM me. That's also always open. And yeah, so I'm very excited to join this particular one. So because it's yeah, feedback has always been an interesting one, right? Like I'm very much an ADHD person, and feedback does not always come in or land in a similar fashion. And therefore, I found it really, really interesting to be part of this conversation. So, without giving too much away for the rest of the conversation, I would like to introduce our SMEs. Darva, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks so much, Dami. My name is Darva Satcher. I'm the Director of Engineering for the Create stage, and I've been at GitLab for about 5 years as of last month. I love GitLab, which is why I'm really excited to have my 5th year anniversary. And feedback is one of my favorite topics, so much so that last year I did a whole podcast for 20 minutes talking about feedback and how it boosts performance. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited that people are interested in learning more about giving and receiving feedback. I'll popcorn over to Denise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Parsonage. I've met some of you before, but I am the Director of Talent Management here at GitLab. I've been with GitLab for just over 3 years. It was 3 years in May. And started out as a people business partner for the marketing organization, and recently moved to the talent management function, which is a new function for us to really lean into here at GitLab. Many of you might not know what that means, but I'm responsible for leading our programs around talent assessment, high-performing teams, promotions work stream, job families, leadership development, and the like. I also work with the PBPs and some of the other TMRGs on leading work around understanding yourselves better, whether it's through strengths finders or some of the other really interesting tools, and then also team building and team effectiveness.
Thank you so much.
One other thing I really love about what Darva said around feedback is that it is a gift. It's a gift we can give ourselves and to each other. And I recently saw a quote. It was from for Creative Leadership around that, how feedback makes us better and boosts our engagement and boosts our performance. So us being really comfortable with feedback, giving and receiving it, is crucial to our success here.
Absolutely. Now, feedback is one of those things that I think it's the greatest gift you can give yourself, the ability to actually listen to it and action on it. But yeah, like I'll talk about this a bit later as well. But it's been for some people, it's not necessarily a very easy journey because it requires you to be very self-reflective and critical, and be allowing others to be critical to your behavior and to your results as well. So yeah, so that's very, very cool. So why do we need to give feedback in the workplace? Why is that important for us? Darva, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So feedback to me is simply data. It's data that can either make or break you in your career, make or break your collaboration. Last week or a few weeks ago, I was in Canada for this tech conference, and one of the younger engineers approached me and they said, no, it was a new engineering manager approached me and said, how can I be a successful engineering manager? What's the one thing? I was like, one thing. And then I said, feedback. And I said, everyone is your customer, whether it's your peers, whether it's your direct reports, whether it's your counterparts, whether it's your manager. Look at everyone as a customer and then ask them, what does success look like to you for me in my role? So basically I said, get feedback so that you can be successful, because there's a job description and then there's the reality of what your job entails. And that could change every day, every week. So not only do you have to be comfortable with receiving feedback just because it grows you, but it also helps you be successful in your role and successful at GitLab. So I would always say, never ignore the feedback. Don't ignore the data. Sit with it, analyze it, investigate it, and really look to make changes towards whatever your counterpart or whomever, whatever they need, because you're basically here to work together. And if you refuse to listen to the feedback, how well can you really work with other people?
Yeah, it's very fair. And it's one of those things as well, I've been told this at some point, like if it's one person give you feedback, then it's up to you if you want to listen to it. But if multiple people give you the same feedback, then you might want to do something about that at the very least.
Well, I'll go a step further, like treat everyone as important, right? I have skip level meetings, for example, and I have a very detailed template. And one of the skip levels said, this is overwhelming. I can't do this. Can you change the template for me? In that situation, I was able to change the template for them. Same thing with the status. I have weekly status updates or weekly one-on-ones. I've had direct reports say, this format does not work for me and how I process information. And then I said, how would you like this format to be so that you can receive it? So I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss one person's feedback. I would try to compromise as much as I could for that person, because that person might have an underrepresented approach to how they digest information, and I wouldn't want to exclude them.
No, that's absolutely fair. I was more suggesting it in the sense of like peer-to-peer situation, like who is it coming from? Like in your situation, if it comes, if I would be your report and you would give me that feedback, that would come in a whole different level than it's just, I don't know, somebody that has sat through a presentation or something. It's like, well, dummy, talk a bit quick. For example. So yeah, so in that sense, it's I always think it's very important to also consider who you're getting it from. Denise, would you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, great points. Both are really valid. one thing I always want to encourage everyone to think about is that feedback is not always critical. It's not always developmental. It's also positive. And I think we get caught up on and scared of the word feedback. And it's so important for us to be giving each other, our own management chain, and ourselves that positive feedback as well on things that we're doing really well and should do more of. And so just want to encourage us to also think about how impactful positive feedback can be to yourselves and to your performance when you know you're doing a good job, when you're being recognized, and when you think about your strengths and what you should do more of. And so just a different frame on the word feedback is really making sure we're thinking about it both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right with it when it comes to, feedback generally gets associated with critical like it's a judgment on how we work and how we've behaved and what we've done and what we've produced. But yeah, you're very right in that it's not just the critical feedback. It's also very, very important to not just stare yourself blind on the negative or like the more critical side of things, but definitely also focus on the good stuff. We have a question on this particular topic, Olivier. I think, was that related to, or like opposite feedback? Do you mean the negative feedback or positive feedback?
Both. Actually, when you receive two feedback from two different people, and they are just the opposite one. If I will take your example, Domi, if someone says you that you are speaking too fast and someone else is saying that you are speaking too slow, or you're ending this same thing, maybe with Darva example, it's even more impactful. If someone says that template for the feedback doesn't work for me, and I would like it to be that way, and someone else says it doesn't work either for me, but I need it to be another way, and both ways are incompatible. That's the problem. I mean, and how do you handle that? Or do you, well, yeah, or do you treat this kind of situation?
Interesting. Does any of our panelists have a?
So in the case where it's a one-to-one thing like a skip level, if my format's not working for them, I just tell them the goal that I had for the skip level. Like my goal is to support you and make sure that your manager is supporting you and that everything's moving smoothly. Based on that requirement, you come up with a template. And as long as we meet the same goal, then we're fine. If it were a team meeting and they said something like, we meet too frequently in person, and someone else says, we don't meet frequently enough, we're GitLab, we're async. So I can compromise and I can say, you can attend async and the other person can come in person. So I usually try to find the compromise, but first I explain and provide context. This is my goal. So it's not enough to say, this doesn't work for me. I need you to propose alternatives, and then let's see how we can compromise. And that's usually when they start thinking, and then it goes back to them, and it's their responsibility now to figure things out.
I fully agree. But my question is really relating to disabilities, and sometimes you just can't compromise just because of I don't know, because of your abilities and or disabilities, and there are some things that you just can't handle, and there is no compromise. I'm not sure I've got an example out of my mind, but maybe you see what I mean. Just because two people have different needs, not only wish, but really needs, just to be able to handle something.
I think if
we need an example, but
so if,
I would.
Sorry if I just like if I understood you correctly, if I come back to the example that I put forward earlier, like my feedback as an ADHD person, if I get excited, I talk really quickly. Always. That's always been a problem. That's been my feedback for as long as I can remember, especially here. And I've been doing a lot of public speaking recently, and a couple of dry runs with different people. Most of people have said the same thing. Now, even if I tell myself to slow down when I speak, even if I feel like I'm speaking super, super slowly, that doesn't still always work. So the thing that I've figured out or like decided to do is, rather than like beat myself up about it at the end, go like ask for, like I did this at a conference the other day. I'll tell people I have ADHD, I speak very quickly, I can't help it. Help me help you. If it goes too fast, please raise your hand and just give me a little hand wave and I will slow down. If then it becomes indeed what Darva said, the other person's problem, really. And if they then say that it's too quickly, then you didn't do anything about it. So it's kind of, my recommendation would be to figure out like, okay, well, what is there that you can do to accommodate whoever you're involved with? Like what is the feedback and how is it, what can you do to improve it for both opposites? But on the other side, like some things you just can't really change, so you have to come up with like a different solution that would work as well. That would be my suggestion.
I think that was excellent, and congratulations on public speaking. You're amazing. I would say, I don't know the specific example, but if we're not answering your question, I would reach out to the team member relations. They might be able to give you the support or the tools that you need to support whoever's making the compromise. I'm not sure if that helps.
I think it's fair enough. Yeah, it helps. Thank you very much, and
Fantastic.
Yeah, that was a great call out on resources and just in general on the topic, that first topic of why we need feedback in the workplace and who's giving it. What I took away is we should all be giving it, right? We should all be open to it. We should all be listening for it. And sometimes we need to be proactive in giving it and asking for what we need. And certainly I love your example, Dami, of just coming straight out and saying, hey, listen, this is where I'm coming from. I recognize this is something I do that others might have a really hard time keeping up with. And here's a suggestion for how you can help me help you. And Darva, I also liked your example of, if my format is not working for you, here's the purpose. You give me your version of what that would be to achieve that same purpose. So I think the key there is that it's two-way, right? And both parties are working towards a goal and how to best meet it for both. So really appreciate all those suggestions and examples. So now that we've talked a little bit of what it looks like, how exactly are we collecting feedback here at GitLab? And just for a little additional context, the reason we also chose feedback this month is because this was a time that aligns with our Talent Cycles suggestion to make sure you have your mid-year check-in with your manager, right? That's a really big one-on-one piece of feedback that we're looking to collect. So wanted to make sure we all understood where we're collecting the feedback, where they exist throughout the year for us here at GitLab. Denise, looks like you have some thoughts on this. You want to start us off?
Yeah, great. Thank you. I did link in a few resources around feedback, like the formal mechanisms for feedback here at GitLab, whether that be through our talent assessment process or your mid-year check-in. Also, you should be receiving and giving feedback regularly through one-on-ones, and often you're having retrospectives on issues or programs that you're working on. So I think that's also, a really practical way to be giving feedback on a daily basis. And if you're feeling like you're not getting enough feedback directly, raise your hand, ask your manager, hey, can I have feedback specifically on X, Y, Z, on how I handled this meeting, how I did this project. And you have that ability to do that at any time. And the more feedback, the better, because as Darva said, it's data and it will help you learn and either do more of something or change your approach potentially as well.
So I've written a long response, but basically totally agree with Denise and what she said. I provide feedback. I try to provide feedback to my team weekly in our one-to-ones under the categories of appreciation or coaching. I want it to be really clear when I'm doing each one so that there's no confusion on what I'm saying. And doing this makes it really easy during the mid-year and the annual reviews. Nothing is a surprise. No one's surprised. So it works really well as long as I stick to it. But I would also echo what Denise said. If you're not getting the feedback at the cadence that you want, just simply ask for it. And the best suggestion I have for that is during your one-to-one with whomever you have one-to-ones with. And ask them a few very targeted questions. I put a few here that will lead to actionable feedback. We don't want, you're doing a good job. Not really good enough, right? Why am I doing a good job? Tell me, give me an example so that you can keep doing that job, right? So that's my response for this one.
That's such a great call out, the actionable feedback. I am very action oriented. Like that's how I'm programmed. Please tell me, what is it? What's the thing that needs to happen so I can then set my sights on it versus having something, that's vague and placed. And I did want to call out quickly too, we do have enablement sessions around the mid-year check-in for those who are thinking, ooh, I didn't do that, or I never set it up, I wasn't aware. Don't worry. We've got the enablement. Denise and her team did a great job of putting it together, and you can take a look at the templates they suggest, etc. My personal feedback with experience is varied. I know, for example, we have an engagement survey, right? That's the place we provide feedback. And so then seeing how that rolls back to the team, how we're trying to figure out how to action it, has been interesting. Also, sometimes when I give feedback, I tend to be a little convoluted sometimes in how I speak. I have a really hard time making an ask, like saying, I need this. So I don't always get what I need. But I would love to also hear from you, Dami. We have these suggested templates and, timing of the feedback. Do these formal ways of collecting feedback, have they worked for you? What has your experience been with feedback?
So it's an interesting thing, right? Like you were saying, like sometimes the stuff that you give as feedback can be a little bit ambiguous, or you said that you struggle like trying to get what you need. Now I always say this to almost everyone, almost daily. If you can verbalize and say, if you are aware of what it is that you need to be successful, that's probably the biggest gift that you can give yourself. Now, I hate ambiguity. As an ADHD person, I need it to be very clear what it is expected of me. Like it's, I see my manager nodding, but, but it's not gonna lie, like the review cycles and the interesting the formal ways of receiving feedback and giving feedback and asking for feedback, being critical about yourself and stuff like that. Not gonna lie, it's very hard for me. I can't really talk about myself in a positive light. I need help with that, generally speaking. I get the help because I ask for it, because I know that I'm bad at this kind of stuff. For example, one of the nicer things that was a part of my onboarding experience is my first one-to-one with Simon. And you're here, so I wasn't actually expecting to big you up this way while you were on the call. But like the format of the first one-to-one, I'm not sure if it's a Simon specific or if other people are doing it the same way. But there are questions that he asked me to ask, like, hey, how would you like to be best? So how can I best support you? How would you like to be praised? If you do something well, would you like to do that? Would you like me to do that publicly or privately? But then also stuff like, what makes you grumpy? How can I tell that you're grumpy? How can I help you when you're grumpy? Just little things. But nobody's ever asked me that I've managed, or I've been like, none of my managers have ever asked me these kinds of things. But for somebody with a brain like mine, that is super helpful, because, like I always have to volunteer the information. I would need you to work with me this way, because otherwise I can't do blah, 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 blah. And same with like the self reviews. Like, in order for me to have a good like a review, like a performance review, I need to give my own feedback about myself first. And I am so bad at that. So like the stuff that I've done so far is like, I will set up a session with one of my teammates, James, who is also a fellow co-lead, basically just body double. We'll just have a session together and like basically just big each other up. But we'll work together on our own document, and it's really silly, but it does help. And like as I said when I started this section, like it's the best thing you can give yourself is the ability to indicate what you need and have an understanding of what you can do, what you miss, what you need, and be able to vocalize that. And that, like and that's not necessarily a neurodivergent thing, right? Like it's having that capability is not reserved to people with a brain like mine. Like it's for good for everybody to have an understanding of uh how they best work, right? That's just better for everyone. Transparency.
Yes, I love that. And I love the curiosity, right? Asking those questions. What makes you grumpy? How do you prefer to be communicated with? I think you're right. And self-promotion can be really hard. I love the example of just hop on, get a coffee chat, and just there is a game I was recently introduced to called the compliment game. It is exactly what it sounds like. You just go around the room and give each other compliments. And boy, does it help kind of put things in perspective sometimes that you may not even realize about yourself. So that is a very, very cool example. And I did want to call out psychological safety, because that's what I hear when you're talking about this. Being asked these questions in a space that's safe just further allows for transparency, which I don't think can fully happen if we don't create spaces that are psychologically safe for each other. And those questions help us understand how to do that. So that's really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Dami.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And it's always fun to see Simon being a little bit bashful in this little Zoom window. Yeah, so, on that note, it is, in the lack of in light of lack of ambiguity, why do we believe it's so important to provide and collect and monitor, not just for the data side of things, but like, what do we do with this information and how can we apply this? If I just briefly just put it to myself, what I mentioned before is the self-review, the information that I see about myself, and comparing that to Simon's notes, allows us or to work towards like, okay, this is where I want to go. How do we get there? Right? That's for me, that helps. And I would like to hear from Darva how you do that with your team.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier. Feedback is important to the actual individual working with all of their like counterparts and their reporting and everyone who they speak with. So it's very important for the individual for growth. Looking at this from a leadership perspective, feedback is very crucial for me. So I do skip levels, and during my skip levels, I capture a lot of data, a lot of feedback, and I immediately put that feedback into action. So I did a skip level recently where the team didn't feel like they were being prioritized. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is the furthest thing from the truth. So I took that feedback and I spoke to our CPO, David DeSanto, and he said, you know what? I'll come and do an AMA for your team, right? So it's important to let me know how you're feeling, how the team is feeling, because I can do things and put that into action. And that's just one example. One thing I also noticed, I've been having skip levels with some team members since 2021. So I can look back and look at how they've changed, how the organization's changed, identify trends and opportunities. So I think that monitoring it is great, collecting it is great, and providing it is required for us to collect and monitor. So it's required for the success of our organization, which is why we have retrospectives, which is why we have mid-years. So it is really crucial that we all feel comfortable providing it and receiving it.
Yeah, and I think from a person in leadership, it's also very important to actually do something with the feedback. So I'm really liking that you say that actions, what comes from that is important. And I think in order to keep the psychological safety with your team and to make sure that they keep giving feedback, if you don't do anything with the feedback, then it will be very unlikely they'll give you some more. So it's very nice to hear that also happens in different parts of the organization. Denise, did you have anything to add to that?
Not specifically. I think Darva did a great job, and love the connection as well. You're establishing trust. You're establishing trust with your relationships to be open to receiving the feedback and also giving it. And it should be bi-directional. I think Darva had some great examples where her team members are giving her feedback as well, and that's That's so important to show as a leader that you are open to the feedback and that you will action it.
Such good call outs. And that really sets us up nicely for the next question that I had, which is, we've touched on it a little bit already. Like, how can we make sure we feel safe giving it? Because the thought of having to provide feedback can be really anxiety inducing. And specifically when folks are wired a little differently. So Dami, I was hoping to pick your brain. I know before this call we had met and you had mentioned some really interesting different ways that feedback directly can be related to folks of neurodiverse backgrounds. So I was hoping you could run us through a couple of things that maybe we're not aware of, right? Neurodiverse activities aren't always shown externally. So would love to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that I can talk about for hours. But it's like there are a couple of aspects that come with having a neurodivergent brain that doesn't necessarily translate well. For example, like as I mentioned before, like having the ability to self-assess yourself, as in like having the ability to understand what you need at any given moment is one thing. But a common thread among a lot of people with a neurodivergent brain is a lot of us either have been diagnosed early or late in life, and there will always be some sort of like shame and guilt and sort of like a feeling of like, oh, I'm not doing it right, because if somebody just says like, oh, you should just use a planner or just make a list or just take a checkbox or just use Trello or just use this or just use that. And for people who struggle with executive dysfunction, which means the for neurotypical brains, you can just think about something and then your brain and your body just go and does it. Sometimes I will be so frozen and knowing exactly what I need to do and how to do it. It's just not getting myself to actually physically do the thing. And that's so hard. And for a lot of people that are not aware that that's the thing, it can look like being lazy, but it's not lazy. It's constantly beating yourself up in your brain and like trying to get yourself to do something like that. That is really hard. Another thing that's really hard is something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means that if, especially a lot of our communication is text-based, I overuse emojis and gifs and all that kind of good stuff, because that allows me to convey the emotion that I have with a certain sentence or phrase or something like that. For a lot of neurodivergent brains, it's very difficult to distinguish what's the intent of a certain sentence is with the assumption that it's probably negative. So, oh, they'll probably think that I don't know how to do this, or they probably think that I shouldn't be. But there's loads of like resources I can share with you, but RSD or the rejection sensitivity is like, oh, I'm just not gonna. Oh my God, they don't like me anymore. I'm getting fired. It's like, or there's it can go very far. Like it can go ridiculously, painfully far as well. Another thing that a lot of people struggle with is stuff like imposter syndrome, because like let's face it, we're all adults, but like for a lot of us, like I have fell into this job really, and it's taken me a very long time to think like, okay, I'm actually not that bad at this role. I can just actually do the and I still struggle with saying like, actually I'm pretty decent at it. It doesn't work like that. I don't feel like I am, like if I compare myself to other people that I feel are way smarter than me, it's not as bad as it used to be, not gonna lie, but there's a lot of people that struggle with oh, what if they find out that I'm actually not, I don't know any clue what I'm talking about, stuff like that. And when you relate that all back into having the requirement to provide feedback to your organization, to your team, to yourself, to your manager, that colors some of the information that you give or some of the information you receive. And that can be hard. And for a lot of people in our organization and people in our TMRG, it isn't always a default to disclose that you have a disability or if you have a neurodivergence. I talk about it all the time on purpose, because the more I talk about it, the more I hope other people feel more comfortable with talking about it as well. This is my way of trying to provide psychological safety to other people to feel more open about sharing their stories. And I'm gonna lie, I've struggled, but it's like I'm doing my part basically. And when it comes to like the work we do with the TMRG, you know, if somebody in your vicinity comes up to you and says, hey, this is what I struggle with, or hey, I have ADHD, or hey, I have I don't know, I'm dyslexic, or I have this, or I have that, or whatever, just ask, how can I help you? And if they don't know, that's also fine, but then give them a little bit of leeway that if they forget to message you back, or if they like are 2 minutes late for your meeting, or if they are, you know, forget to email you back within the 24 hours that you have as an SLA or something, just give them a nudge, you know. For me, for example, again, tell me to shut up if I talk too much, but if I don't have it in my face, then it's not happening. If I don't write it down, it's not happening. If I don't have it in my calendar, it's not happening. So these are all small things that you can help us be more successful, I guess. Again, I'll stop talking now. Where were we?
No, you're getting a lot of love.
I'm very passionate about this subject.
Yeah.
So
Tommy, thank you so much for sharing. You know, Flavia is saying awareness and kindness while communicating brings trust to the relationships. And I couldn't agree more. I love that you disclose things up front, because I think it really helps set up some much more understanding relationships and communications. And Darva, I see that you have some notes in here as well.
I'd like to send out a call of action to the leadership to create an environment of psychological safety and trust, as you mentioned before. I think that if you're a leader and you haven't received any constructive feedback, you need to question how much psychological safety is going on in your team. Might not be your fault. It's just the fact that we're not 100% perfect. So you need to create that environment where you are getting that feedback at some point from someone, and that you're actioning it, and look at it as a win. Anytime you get feedback and you can implement it, you are winning. It might feel like, oh, you're winning because you're building the trust amongst your team. So just as leaders, no matter what feedback we get, just try to erase your preconceived conditions, preconceived ideas. Try to approach it unbiased and just listen. At least if your first reaction is no, you should always pause and say, let me think about it. Never say no immediately. I just wouldn't. That's my recommendation for the leaders.
I love a good call to action. Thank you, Darva, for that.
I think I'm a bit too early in my thing. It's next is mine, isn't it? Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, yes, leadership does 100% have a responsibility to provide psychological safety. And I'm very grateful that in my team and my direct vicinity, I have this. And I'm very much aware that there's some teams that don't necessarily have this. Which I do think there's definitely, as you say, Darva, a responsibility to the leaders to provide this. But yeah, like if there isn't, you know, like there's ways of you know, ask for help. Like I had somebody message me privately, and I'll refrain from any further details, but they were asking me like, how do I get this like how do I do this, or how can I tell well, basically like they wanted to know how to provide or get the to the psychological safety point. So it's kind of, you know, team member relations, message team member relations is one of the things, right? Right. So it's to make it a bit more practical, right? How can we, as team members, managers, how can we prepare to give and receive useful feedback? How can you explain some best practices of, you know, where or how to give feedback the best way?
Yeah. So we do really rely on the SBI model, which is situation, behavior, and impact. And you can think about giving both positive and constructive feedback with this model. There's details in the handbook and plenty of information on how to apply it, but it really helps you frame your feedback in a direct, specific, and meaningful way. And if I use an example on positive feedback, Darva says, like earlier, you know, you did a great job. That's, you know, it's nice, but what was great about it? And so you could reframe it to say, you led this session on X subject, and So that was the situation. The behavior was you really engaged the audience by being very specific in your information. And the impact on that was that the audience walked away with understanding more about your subject and now have a call to action. So great job. Keep doing more of that. You're a role model in delivering this type of information to this audience. So it's very specific. It talks about the behavior and the impact that it had. And so you totally understand where you did a great job because it was so detailed. And we encourage all managers to be able to apply the SBI model when they're giving feedback. But as a team member, apply the same model when you're giving feedback up or across, from a peer perspective, whether that is constructive or positive feedback. And I write it down. This is, my own thing that I've been doing for years and years. And my experience is that I'll think about, okay, I need to give this person feedback. I write down specifically, I even write SBI as like my little cheat to say, okay, what is the feedback I want to deliver? And then I practice how that feedback might go. Sometimes I say it out loud. Sometimes I just talk in my head. And sometimes if it's something that I'm struggling with, that I'm worried about how the other person might react to the feedback, I will role play it with a friend or a colleague. Not usually my husband, but someone, usually at work. I really want to give this person feedback, or I need to give feedback on X situation. Here's what I'm thinking. And just, have that dialogue. It's really, really helpful for me. So a quick hack for you.
I love the reminder that it's not just from management down. Also, we should be providing feedback up, and that is an absolutely wonderful model to do so. So I do want to be mindful of our time. This is such a great discussion. We've got 7 minutes left, and we did want to have an AMA as well. So Dami and I have a couple more questions, but before we get to that, I did want to hop to number 11, our AMA. And Gosia, I don't know if you're on the call and want to verbalize.
I am.
Hi.
I am.
How are you?
Hi. Yeah, so I have a question because we talk about feedback and we touched on the feedback can be, but be positive and more constructive, critical. But I can see how we can make sure that this positive feedback, especially for high performers, is not creating this additional pressure on them. If someone gets the appreciation frequently as they should, if they are high achiever, but isn't this can't it create this additional pressure, making a bar higher and higher and higher for them? How we can balance that so people who are doing great job and are getting appreciated for that as they should, but they don't treat it they don't feel it as additional stress.
I have a really small bit of commentary to make on that before I pass it over to one of the leaders. But how not to create additional pressure for people who are already high achievers, I think that very much depends on what the high achievers are looking for in their careers. If their goal is to do more or achieve more or something like that, that should be dependent on their ambitions. If you're giving feedback, or if you speak to people that you think are high achievers, but you're not managing them. For example, if I were to give feedback to one of my peers, saying, "Oh, you're doing such a great job," I would be much more cognizant of their home situation. Please calm down. You have a work-life balance. You should have a balance. You should look at your family and take time to not do work. But when it comes to management, I probably I think I would like to pass it over to Darva for her input.
This one's really tricky, and I'll explain why, because I've had situations, but definitely if I see someone who's a high performer, and then the first thing I do is I check to see if they worked on the weekend. If they have, I give them the biggest guilt trip. I'm just like, why are you working on the weekend? You're going to burn yourself. I'm just nagging. And then I try to get a little more aggressive in saying that you're not really following my guidance, my mentorship. I'm trying to support you and you're not allowing me to. But to a point, right? I had one direct report who said that I was being exclusive by not allowing them to work the way they wanted to work. And that the way their brain works is they have to go, 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 and just get it out. They're working on it and it can't be stopped. And that I should be more sensitive to that. And as long as they're not underperforming, allow them the freedom to do that because they had to do it. And they were one of those type of people who would not get burned out. They just had to do it because it was just, they couldn't sleep until it was done. So I had to learn to be flexible based on the individual, but that was a very, very rare situation. And when they told me that I was being exclusive, I intentionally like backed off. I was like, I'm not trying to be exclusive here. And I was kind of taken aback because I was trying to help. So that made me rethink, again, I listened to the feedback, rethink like how I define pressuring someone. It was actually more pressure for them, for me to tell them to stop and slow down. But in general, I pull up the data and I'm like, you know, if you work on the weekends, from my data, what I've seen in the past, after doing this 3 or 4 times, you're going to be really stressed out. You're going to start having maybe negative collaborations with the team. Like it can lead to a lot of problems. And ultimately, if they do run into problems, then the feedback becomes more constructive. It's like, I told you here, and now look what happened. So, but it's a balance. Sometimes I can't stop them, and you know, and if they're successful and I can't stop them, then I just let them go. Just depends.
I have one more thing to add from a neurodivergence perspective. Like, I know that I do this, and I know that some other people in my team do this as well. Like, I have very much a struggle getting started with a lot of things. Like, I can have a deadline for something, like let's say making a presentation, and I can look at a blank screen for weeks and not being able to start. Now, this has always been something that's worked. Like, as soon as it becomes an urgency, if I have, like, let's say, I don't know, 3 days left, then for 72 hours I will do night work. I will pull all-nighters all weekend and I will get it done. Now I know that this is not healthy, but unfortunately this is something that had something that's worked since I was 16, you know, since I was still in secondary school. And I'm not proud of it, but it does work. And I'm very much aware that I should be then giving myself a little bit more skinch with, like, okay, well, maybe I should take it a little bit easy the next day or something like that. But I know for a fact that other people in my team, or like in, you know, the neurodivergent constituents are, you know, less what do you say, like they will just go, you know, so it'll be more on the vibe that Gosha mentioned.
I will just say you are not alone. I see this often, and I usually know my team to know, you know, who to like leave alone, let them work the way they want. And it's just like, who am I to define what a structured work schedule is, kind of, you know? So it depends, Gosha, on the person, and you'll know because you know your team.
Yeah, and you just called out that beautiful two-way communication again. So thank you. Thank you for the example. Amanda, I see you put in some comments here. Did you want to verbalize for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to share something. I think a topic that was discussed was feeling kind of the imposter syndrome in terms of receiving the feedback. Um, Something like one thing that I've been trying to work on feedback that I received was positioning myself more as a thought leader and like putting my opinion out there as an expert. So that's been really hard for me. So a tip that I've done is I have a running conversation with ChatGPT that I feed all of my performance feedback to. And then when I'm working on things, I ask for help, like based on this feedback, how can I, whatever. And in this case, like a blog post that I've written, I'll give it to ChatGPT and say, you know, based on Melissa's last feedback of positioning yourself as a thought leader, am I coming across that way? If not, how else can I do this? Because for me, it's hard because I feel like an imposter when I do it.
Very cool trip. Very, very cool tip. And I hate to cut this short, but we are at time and I want to make sure that I am respectful of everyone's. There were some great questions in here, some great, you know, sharing. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. We do have a calendar of events, so feel free to check out that link to make sure that you know when the next one is happening. And if you have suggestions, feel free to comment on our issue. We are all ears. This is meant to be helping everyone feel that career growth is attainable. So a big thank you to Dami, to Darva, to Denise. This was super valuable, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to help us out here today. So hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.